Yeah. So then when we go live, oh wait, are we live? That's okay. We'll cut that in post. Welcome everybody to Dancing Dragons Live. Dancing Dragons Live is Dancing Dragons weekly live show where you get to hear from real coaches talking about real facts that affect your real life. Now, Dancing Dragons is a brand new coaching collective. You can go to our website at DancingDragons.CC. You can book an appointment with an intake specialist who will find you the perfect coach to get you to where you're going in life. At Dancing Dragons, we have coaches that deal in every kind of niche and every kind of skill set that you could possibly want. We have career coaches, leadership coaches, character coaches, numerology coaches. We have everything that you could possibly hope for. So go to DancingDragons.CC. The CC stands for Coaching Collective, and get you a coach to get you to where you want to go in life. Today, we have a really cool topic. It's a topic that's near and dear to my heart. And that topic is Lamarckian evolution and epigenetics. So if you're not familiar with Lamarckian evolution, that's okay. I was familiar with the concept of Lamarckian evolution without knowing the thing, like the moniker Lamarckian evolution. But epigenetics is obviously the big deal in genetics. Basically, it's the center of biological science at this point, I think everybody, it's like there's a bunch of videos on it. A bunch of people are talking about it. So we got two experts here, not me. I'm not an expert. I'm just somebody who's interested. We got two experts here on epigenetics and whatnot. And so we will be talking with them. I will be telling some stories from my own life and stuff. But here's the thing, right? So the idea of epigenetics in Lamarckian evolution is this idea that you can actually change like your inner workings like throughout your life. That's not just you're not just a static person. That, you know, with epigenetics, there are on and off switches that can turn on certain genes, turn off other genes, and that can actually fundamentally change different aspects of yourself throughout your life. And then the idea of Lamarckian evolution is that through experience, you can pass on basically genetic information that your offspring will be able to use, right? So these are the two basic concepts that we're going to be tackling, and anything tangentially related to it. So the way I've looked at this, and so this is something I came across epigenetics probably like maybe 10 to 15 years ago. I can't tell you exactly when, but I got really interested in it. And so for me, this was like this is like a motivating factor, because I come from a family that's like kind of like a broken family. You know, my mother was a single mother of 7, right? Half of my, so 4 out of 7 of my brothers and sisters graduated high school. Like, so it's like, you know, we're like right there, you know, so we got like, I got like my brothers and sisters have faced like a lot of challenges throughout their lives and whatnot. And so for me, this is like always like a thing like, well, how do we change this fundamentally? Like, how can we help this? And the idea that there were like certain genetic markers that could be checked off or ticked up or turned on that could actually affect the outcome going down the line, I thought was really interesting. And then not only that, but the idea that maybe like if you're struggling with stress or psychological problems or any kind of emotional distress, right, that those two could be tied to these genetic markers that are a little bit more flexible than what most people perceive them to be. And so for me, this was like a huge motivating factor where it's like, well, if I work on myself more, if I get myself in a better place, if I set myself up for success, not only will it help me in my own life, but I will be able to pass on that information, that lifestyle, that kind of the change in genetics in order like to my own kids, right? And so that was always like a really big motivation factor, right? So it's like, well, why would you eat right or exercise or do this other stuff? But if you think like you know, if it's just for you, you know, who cares? Like, you know, like there's like the study or something that's like people are 5 times more likely to give their dogs prescribed medicine than to take medicine for themselves, right? Like And so it's like, we don't generally take care of ourselves as much as we take care of other people. But when you get this idea of epigenetics or Lamarckian evolution, and you're like, well, hey, maybe this is like a thing. Like maybe I actually have control over this genetic makeup that I'm going to be passing on to generations to come. You get more stake in the game, like you buy in a little bit more on how you take care of yourself, because the way that you caretake for yourself is literally going to be passed down to your children and your children's children. So I don't know, Olivia, did I say anything that was too crazy right there? You tell me.
Nothing too crazy. A lot of the things you mentioned are part of the Lamarckian evolutionary theory. So starting out with just the basic definitions of those two, because I think we need to break those two down. So Lamarck, as you said, posited that organisms evolve by passing down these traits they acquire through their lifetime. An important distinction to make there is that the traits that they acquire through their lifetime or the traits that they don't use. And so a lot of these things could be passed down via use or disuse. That was his whole theory. Yeah. And then we get to epigenetics, which is the theory that behaviors in combination with your environment can change the function of your genes. Now, it's not changing your DNA. So your DNA is something it's pretty fixed. It's very hard to change that without mutations being randomly incorporated from the environment. But in terms of changing the way that genes are expressed, that's certainly something that happens throughout one's lifetime. And there's a lot of running theories now exploring the idea that we could pass that down onto our children. Matter of fact, there is it's called I believe it's the development of health or origins of health and disease hypothesis that talks a lot about that. And there's a lot of studies going on currently with that. I'm not an expert in those ongoing studies. My expertise lies strictly in evolution.
Okay. So Maza, what do you guys say about it?
Thank you so much, you guys. Tell us about the definition of it and what is it. I would like to say that when we talk about Lamarck and when we talk about Darwin, there are some differences. And everyone, I guess, know about the example of giraffe. If not, then Lamarckian is based on the inheritance of acquired characteristic. For example, giraffe's neck stretching during its life. For example, when they were stretching over trees to get leaves, their neck stretched. So that's why later on all the giraffe, they have long neck. They have this phenomenon. So when we see this phenomenon in Lamarck and Darwin's theory, we see that Lamarck said that the ancestral giraffe stretched their neck to reach higher leaves. That's why they have higher neck. And on the other hand, Darwin says that some giraffes were born with longer necks and survived better, and that's why this trait passed on to the other generation, and that's how giraffe, they have longer necks. So it's the same thing they are talking about, but they have a different whole idea behind.
Yeah, so it's a causal difference here. So Lamarck's idea was because you're stretching your neck, your kids are going to have longer necks. And then Darwin's idea was just the giraffes with the longer necks are going to reproduce more often and more consistently. And so therefore the average length of necks will increase over time. Right. So I think 200 years ago, maybe 175 years ago, almost the entirety of the human race was oh yeah, Darwin's definitely right, and this other guy's an idiot, right? But Olivia, why not both? The classic meme, why not both? Do we have any information that completely debunks Lamarckian's idea of how things work?
Well, it depends on who you ask. A lot of people have claimed that his theory has been debunked. I am in the camp of people that believes that we are consistently building on science. And so Lamarck came first, then about 50 years later, we had Darwin come in and have this theory. And because Darwin's theory had a lot more evidence to back it up, people believed that forever and ever. And then we got more into this topic of epigenetics. And then people started coming back to Lamarck. Now, I don't Now, there is more evidence for natural selection and evolution than there is for gravity. So there's just a ton of evidence for these two things happening in the world, which is why it's so perpetuated, right? When we talk about epigenetics, and we get these modifications that happen in one's lifetime. And in that way, it is similar to Lamarck's theory that we have these changes to our genotype happening during the course of our lifetime. That's something that Darwin didn't cover, or I don't believe he covered that at all. I could be mistaken in that, but I'm fairly certain Origin of Species did not cover any of that. And so we have this almost marriage of the two of these theories, a lot more Darwin, and then we have this little bit from Lamarck, but that little bit is how we get to epigenetics, which has been an incredible tool the past 20, 30, 40 years. And I'm predict it's only going to be an even more incredible tool as we learn more about it.
So interestingly enough, like I know that there's like been studies that show like different animals, I think even humans, when like zygotes are forming in the womb, that they actually communicate with the mother and take in some sort of information that kind of spells out to them the kind of world that they're going to be born into, right? And so, no, there was like one experiment with, I forget, some kind of animal where it's like, depending on what month they're going to be born, their hair will be longer or shorter, depending when they're born, right? And so there is this kind of idea that, you know, we think of it as just like the egg has a certain amount of genes, and then the sperm has a certain amount of genes. They mix, they form a zygote, and then that zygote just grows, and it's like a foregone conclusion. This is already what's going to happen. But then we get this like contrary experiment that shows like, well, maybe it's not all that simple. Maybe there's more information going on. Now, whether or not this is actually, see, I don't believe it like changes the gene, right? I think that a lot of DNA is more like, it probably got a lot more information stored in it than we think of, just like, well, this has the one thing, right? And then it's like it's like a dialer, like, you know, like with like a radio, like you turn it and it changes a little bit, you know, right? So it's like so like that's my concept of it, where it's like yeah, I mean, maybe our biology is a lot more complicated than we think it is, right? Maybe when a woman is forming like a zygote inside of her, right, she's actually like, her biology based off of her experiences and her understanding is actually dialing in the different genes to say like what is going to be the most helpful and the most preferred traits, right? As far as now, obviously there's probably some sort of biological fence there, like you only got certain genes, like, you know, like me, I'm 5'7", you know, like, you know, if my wife thought like, oh, our kid should be really tall, she can't make a 7-foot kid, you know, we just don't got the genetic makeup for that, right? Mm-hmm. But I mean, hey, what's his face? Michael Jordan's father swears to God that like his son was short in the 9th grade, like a short kid in the 9th grade, but he wanted to play basketball so much he willed himself to grow. That's what he claims. And Michael Jordan was 6'6", and he was apparently below average when he was in 9th grade. So, so that's an interesting thing. But I digress. So, but the idea is that it's like, is there anything that like, does science back up what I'm saying here? Like, is it possible that our mothers are like dialing in like the preferred genetic situation, or the preferred genetic markers that are already embedded in our DNA, not changing our DNA, but just switching what genetic material is expressed?
Mm-hmm. Sorry, did you go ahead?
No, I just want to like say this, like back up this with the studies on animals as well. So studies on offspring of animals, like the metabolism, indicate that pups who derive from father with the low protein diet are more prone to increased, body weight, or impaired their glucose tolerance, or they have like gene expressions which is sympathetic to more different kind of disease later on. So these things does matter, how your genes is evolving that time, that does influence you. So if we take example of epigenetic, is DNA is like a piano keys, and our epigenetic is which keys are played, how loud they are played, and when they are played. So all these things, they do have their tabs beforehand.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think a really good example of this is to think about different cells in our body. So every single cell in our body has the exact same DNA. But if you look at something like a skin cell versus a brain cell, they look completely different. They have two very different functions, two very different phenotypes. They look, or not even phenotype, but just how they operate is in their structure is very, very different. But they have the same DNA. And how is that possible? And that's where we get into epigenetics. And that is where we get these silencing or expression of certain genes, and those different combinations turning on and off, or just being turned on completely, turned off completely, or being timed at what times a day they're going to operate, gives us so much variety. And that's where we get all of the different makeup of our cells. That's where we get different outcomes in our own phenotype. And absolutely, that's where we get this potential communication going on between a mother and a fetus. Now, to back up to your question about how biologically possible is that, it's certainly very possible. We think about how we change around our environment, and certainly the environment outside of the mother's body is going to affect her child in utero. That's something that is very, very well studied. That's being said, oh, sorry, go ahead.
Right. And exactly in the same way, there is link with mental health and epigenetics as well. For example, there are like 30 to 50% of mental health disorder. Their risk is environmental when we talk about. And then there are like chronic stress, which is linked to measurable, changes in stress regulation genes in a person. And also when we talk about trauma-related epigenetic marks, they observe 2 to 3 generations in human studies. If we take example of Holocaust survivors or early childhood adversity, and that all linked to cortisol regulation and later on in their life as well. So that's how epigenetics works, how all these environmental factors affect.
So, and just to jump on that, Maz, I was reading that there was actually a study done on stress management, right, in mindfulness practices, and that parents who went through psychotherapy and stress management and mindfulness practices had children that were actually like just naturally more resilient to stress, and actually physiologically responded differently to stress, like more healthily, like they had even less inflammation in their own bodies in stressful situations. So I think that's kind of interesting. And just to, because I understand if you're starting to watch, if you've watched this video up until this point and you never heard of epigenetics before this or something, it might sound like magic. It might sound like a very silly idea, right? Just so you know, like this is like the accepted evolutionary and genetic theory at the moment. Like this is the most widely spread like understanding of how our genes work, right? And there are tons of experiments and tons of studies that have corroborated this idea of epigenetics, right? And so, and if you think that that's, and again, this is a little bit of a tangent, but just because this is just way less believable, but just completely accepted science as well, right? So if you think that this is magic, where it's like, oh, you eat like, enough omega-3s or something, and then, you're going to be less obese because your epigenetic switch turned off for the obesity. By the way, that is an actual like thing that people believe, is that if you eat a lot of omega-3s, it turns off your genes that are prone to obesity, right? So, like the thing that's really crazy, I just had a kid a year and a half ago, right? And what I learned was just like the craziest thing is that when babies breastfeed, right, they actually send signals through their mother's breasts. And then their mother creates milk that is specifically designed to their specific nutritional and biological needs. For instance, if the baby gets sick, the mother will see the sickness. And if she has what do you call it? The white blood cells or whatever, the immuno reaction to whatever it is that sickness is, she will put it inside the breast milk so that the baby will have the antibodies. That's the word I was looking for. Mm-hmm. The baby will have the antibodies to actually like fight off the sickness that the baby has, right? And the mother will change drastically the nutritional content of her milk based off of any deficiencies her baby might have. And then something that's even crazier, right, is that when babies are first born, right, they are unable to regulate their own body temperature, right? And so as like the father, I could like, you know, take my shirt off and put the baby under a blanket and hold him close, and I will keep the baby warm myself, right, with my own body heat. But when a mother does the same thing, the baby's actually is like homeostasisly linked to the mother. And so the baby will actually regulate his or her own body temperature based off of where the mother's is at. And it doesn't work with anybody else but their mother. So it's a really interesting thing. And it seems like magic. It seems like magic. It's like, how is this happening? Right. So before you start jumping to these, like, and you can go to your local, you know, hospital where they like OBGYN and ask these questions, and they will tell you straight up, yes, that is exactly what happens, right? This is not a controversial thing that people say. Like, this is exactly what is accepted in modern science, is that this is how breast milk reacts. This is how babies regulate their temperatures. So that to me seems like way more like magic than certain external like factors influencing which genes of mine turn on and are off, right? Like, this is just like crazy. Like, how does the breast milk know that it needs more protein or more, you know, vitamin B or something? I know, like, it's crazy, but it doesn't. So
there's one more thing, that epigenetic changes are not like permanent. With therapy, with supportive environment and healthy routine and stress reduction, we can like, and gene activity, its links to stress can be normalized. And there are like real life examples which explain simply, like children who are raised in nurturing environments, they show healthier stress responses, and individuals who are exposed to long-term trauma, they may show that changes in stress-related gene activity more. And then there are also like positive changes such as like therapy, stable housing, or your social support can biologically improve your outcomes and change those patterns in you.
And that makes so much sense, especially when you think about that, the context of why these changes are important. You know, when you have these stressful situations or any kind of perceived stress where your body is going to be physiologically affected, your genes are going to pay attention to that. There's going to be a lot of different cellular communication going on in your body to help you survive the situation that you're in. And if you're in that situation for too long, or you have this really traumatic upbringing, or you have this really traumatic experience, your body will adjust to that to help you survive that same experience over again and again, even if you're not still in it. And that's where we get this phenomenon of trying to redo our reactions to things. And a lot of that does go into play at the gene level.
Right. So exactly same way like Lamarckian evolution and this epigenetic thing is, Lamarckian, they believe that traits gained during life are permanent and passed on to the children. But epigenetics does not support this idea fully, and instead it shows that environment influence how genes behave, and these changes are often temporary and can be reversed. And there's like a lot of things and a lot of methods that we can use to reverse those things in life.
Yeah, so I mean, I would have to look it up, but I remember seeing a thing that was like explaining how I think it was a TED Talk actually, explaining how like they did an experiment or they did a study on like these lizards or whatever, and it was like either their limbs had been severed or they like restricted the lizard's limbs. I forget what the study was exactly, but that the offspring of the lizards that had their limbs restricted had the other limbs be much stronger in comparison. And so it was kind of like a Lamarckian, like, well, this is evidence to support the Lamarckian theory, right? Because I think even at the epigenetic level, we wouldn't think like, oh, if your like left arm gets restricted, then your right arm will be stronger. I don't think that that's really consistent with epigenetic thought. Now, there's like another experiment with rice where it was like if they subjected rice to cold weather, then the offspring of that rice would be more resistant to cold weather. That could be more explained through epigenetics, I think. But like this whole idea about like the limbs of the lizards being stronger in birth because their parents didn't have use of those limbs, I think is much more along the Lamarckian concept. Now, again, I'm not saying that this is proof that Lamarckian concepts are real, right? But I'm just saying, like, why not both? Like, if we don't, I'm not saying that there's like a huge amount of evidence to be like, oh yeah, Lamarckian concepts of evolution are definitely true, but we also don't have enough evidence to just dismiss it outright. Which again, Lamarckian evolution is a claim, and if you're having a claim, then you should probably have a lot of evidence to back that up for people to accept it as what's happening. But I'm not saying to just accept it. I'm just saying, like, keep an open mind about it, like maybe this could be a thing happening. And it isn't like there are no studies or no evidence for Lamarckian evolution. It's just flimsy evidence and flimsy studies. What do you say about that, Maza?
About this, like how you can, how you change your genetic or genetics, epigenetics, while you cannot change your underlying, DNA sequence. You can alter your epigenome, which is like the chemical which switches turn off or you turn on. So these modifications which occur in our response to your environment, behavior, your psychological state, are effectively reshaping how your body reads your genetic code, and that can be changed through lifestyle as well. Whereas like nutrition is there, exercise, sleep, and quitting the toxins, all these things, and changing your psychology, which impact your genes as well. Where comes stress management, also comes social engagement, therapy comes there too. All these things can, have better impact on your life.
Mm-hmm. So,
but the question, what I would like to ask is like, can you change your actual genetics?
Without splicer? I mean, I don't know.
Without mutating humans, well, you have DNA mutations that happen throughout your life just by different exposure. I mean, UV exposure is a really good example of genetic mutations and modifications. Consciously, I can't think, oh, I really want to have brown eyes, so I'm just going to concentrate really hard until my genes change. You can't do that. That's probably a really crude example, but you can't do that. You can get contacts, but when it comes to actually changing your DNA, that's not something that we're usually very capable of.
But
I mean, I think. Okay, go ahead, Martha.
Yeah. These days there are like genes editing as well, like human genome editing, which are typically reserved for treating specific kind of genetics disorder in the offspring, and before the birth, they can like treat some kind of things to, does the child does not like have those disorders. So these kind of few things are possible because of the science a little bit, but science is like more and might be in future more advanced to do something, but till now there are some biological limits in that.
Right. The most we can do is, you're right, typically fetal or in utero. But for adult humans, it's currently not possible.
Yeah.
Anything is possible given 100 years. So we'll see what happens. But as of right now, it's not possible. We do a lot of like I've mentioned before, our DNA is something that our DNA sequence is something we have in every single cell, and within those cells, it's incredibly versatile. So we still have a lot of different things going on, and a lot of different ways that we can change our outcome on who we want to be, what we want to be based off of our environment. But that is more psychological practices that will eventually manifest themselves physiologically.
Right. Or lifestyle changes.
Right.
Or nutrition.
So, Olivia, I don't know if you're familiar with this, but there's like different things that they've done with like CRISPR or something, with like trying to like heal up some sort of like genetic disorders or whatever. Mm-hmm. I don't know how effective they've been. Do you know more information? I've heard whispers about it. I haven't like followed it very closely. So, do you have any extra information?
Yeah, so I don't, my expertise is not within the human body. I work a lot with other animals. CRISPR is an incredible method that we've been able to use to do a lot of different DNA transformations. Most of that is bacterial, and there's a lot of different interesting things that microbial life can do to change their DNA. Now the stuff that they can do is absolutely incredible. And we can get more into that if you like, but in terms of how it affects human diseases, I don't know much about that.
Oh, okay. So I just looked this up. There's a baby with a rare metabolic disease, CPS1 deficiency, I guess. They used CRISPR on this infant and was able to cure it of the disease. And so this was back in 2025, actually. 2025. So they're making these, again, that's an infant, much smaller than like a full grown human. So maybe that makes it a little bit more, but maybe there's like a way to isolate it when a genetic disorder affects only a certain part of the body. So you only need to do a certain part of the body, but who knows what the long-term effects of that will be if you have like different DNA in different parts of your body. But you might have like some sort of issue with like, it's like when you get like an implant and, your body starts to reject the other part, so hopefully that doesn't happen to this infant, obviously. But sorry, I just realized I was like, I mean, it sounds like a great story, though, right? So, but the point is, though, is that it's like so we are making scientific advancements in this kind of direction, like tons. Now, I think as far as like this epigenetics thing, like if we really are able to map out our genome in like more specific ways and actually come up with these epigenetic markers and discover like all of them and like obviously there's probably so many, it's like mind-boggling how many epigenetic markers there are, right? But like let's say like eventually science catches up and we use AI or something to identify all these things, and then we have like all these like maybe like when you're born you'll get a readout that's like don't eat rice or you're going to get colon cancer, who knows.
When we talk about inheritance, some epigenetic marks can be passed down to offspring, meaning a parent's environment, like diet or stress, might affect their children or grandchildren's health. So it's inherited in that way. And when we talk about epigenetic, there is also a concept of reversibility. So in reversibility, many epigenetic changes are reversible. For example, when you talk about quitting smoking, can eventually reverse certain harmful epigenetic marks which are associated with lung cancer or some other sort of diseases. So you can, reverse those things in your life.
So here's an idea, Olivia, right? So I got this idea that so like have you ever like put like a cord on a dog, right? Like if you put like a wire on a dog, they freak out, right? Like they're like, get that off of me, right? Yeah. And so the idea behind it is that like dogs are just like pre-wired that way because of snakes, right? Like snakes are basically like the oldest predator. Like in evolution, snakes have remained unchanged for, I think hundreds of millions of years. And so like snakes and alligators are basically our oldest predators, right? And so even like with my son, right? Like there's like this cactus that like, I don't know, it's like a famous cactus toy. Like it moves around and it repeats what you say.
Yeah,
It
yeah.
always freaks out babies. Like it freaks babies out. Like my son was like, oh Jesus. Like my son is a very brave little boy. He likes to play with everything. But man, when he saw that green thing wiggling around, he was not about it, right? And so it made me feel like there was like this genetic information about snakes, just like, hey, stay away from anything that's green and wiggly, like you don't want that noise, right? So do you think that there's any kind of like genetic information that isn't necessarily a genetic like an actual gene in you that like creates an effect, but genetic information like, hey, this is bad, like do you think that that's a possibility?
In certain ways, absolutely. So fear is one of the most powerful psychological things out there.
Mm-hmm.
I would, and you can correct me on that. I'm not a psychologist, but as far as I know, fear is, it's at least physiologically, it releases just a ton of different chemical signals. And so it has a really lasting impact on your body. So I can imagine, if almost in the same way that dogs have evolved to avoid things are green and wiggly, I can imagine that the same could be passed down for humans. Now, I am not suggesting that we find that out. I'm not suggesting we put a bunch of snakes and babies together and figure that out. I think that's a terrible idea. But I do believe it's certainly possible, because if you have this very strong signal that's happening to you over generations and generations, the epigenetics of your body are going to be affected by that. And you have certain genes that are turned off and on to help you potentially better recognize things that are scary or things that tend to cause illnesses, diseases, or just fear. And if that's something that's green and wiggly, that's something that could be possible. Absolutely.
Right.
Okay.
Absolutely right.
Right.
And you see this in two households. In one household, a mother does not respond to stress as much, or in tiny things does not be stressed out that much. You see the kids of that mother, and then in another household, a mother who's stressed out a lot in either on tiny things, and how those kids react to different things. These are two entirely different upbringing they are bringing it, So those kids might not react on very big things, and the other kids might react on tiny, small things. So it does affect. So this is like passing on to generation, and also your environment as well. So both are affecting.
I don't know. I just like to feel like, and again, maybe I'm way off basis here, and maybe we don't have enough information. We are still a fledgling race of humans that are just hurling their way through the universe. But like, I like to think that if I'm brave, and I stand up to things, like outside of even my son, like watching me do that, just like being brave throughout my life has showed my DNA, like it's rewarding to be brave, like this is what you should do, right? And it's like, if you're not brave, and it's like you run away from things, and then you have kids, it's telling your offspring like, hey, it's rewarding to be scared. Like it's like you run away, run away, And so it's like, and there is kind of like this. It was funny. I was driving through a blizzard to get back here, right? And it's like. And I was thinking about this also because I'm also listening to an audiobook, which I swear to God, I just started yesterday. It's crazy the timing of it, right? Because I didn't know what this audiobook was about. It's a science fiction book, and it's called Children of Time. And it is about exactly what we're talking about right now. It's like, it's very much into this idea of like this takes place in the future where we're like colonizing other planets or whatever. And this woman creates this virus to help like evolve monkeys to like become like kind of catch up to humans. But then it turns out no monkeys make it to the planet that she's working on. So now like spiders pick up this virus, and then it gets way out of whack because it was designed for monkeys, not spiders. But anyway, I digress. It's a really cool book, Children of Time. I forget who wrote it. But the point is, though, is that so I was listening to that audiobook, driving like an idiot through a blizzard, right? And I was like, there's like a balance of bravery and stupidity, all right? It's like, it's like at a certain point, like it's really tough driving out there right now, right? And I'm driving, 30 minutes away from my house. And it's like, okay, like this is actually like fundamentally dangerous. And my wife, I was driving my wife to work and coming back home. And my wife's first instinct was like, oh, we cannot go. And I was like, of course we can go, right? Then I'm driving back home and I'm like, oh, this is legitimately dangerous, right? Like I'm having a real hard time just keeping my own tires straight, right? So at a certain point, there's like this, there is this cosmic conversation about what is brave and what is stupid, right? And so it's like passing on the certain bravery and certain stupidity, like at a certain point, how do we negotiate that? And doesn't even, I mean, obviously we're doing the granted that like our actual behavior can affect our genes and pass it on to our youth. But like at a certain point, like how do we figure out where's the best thing to do it? Like, how do we guide our own lives in figuring that stuff out? And is it even smart to try to figure it out? Like maybe like just by trying to figure it out, we're tainting the genetic pattern here. I don't know. Like Olivia, at some point, when are we Dr. Frankenstein and we're making a big mistake?
Oh, that's a very good question. That's a very good question. Everyone has their own opinion on this, and I try to remain as impartial as I can. You know, as a scientist, you want to decrease the amount of bias as much as you possibly can. So I have run away from having an opinion on this topic, just because I don't want to impede my own work. But there is certainly going to be a point. Some people think we've already hit it. Others think that we're far from it. But in terms of if we can pass down bravery to our children, I think we certainly can. It may not be as genetic as some people think. And sometimes we don't even have to know if it is or not in order to accomplish it, you know? And so when we're thinking about how we've managed to pass down certain traits that are desirable for so long, we didn't necessarily know that what we were doing. We just knew that we knew that we had this desirable outcome. So in terms of, again, passing these characteristics down to our kids, is it more genetic? Is it more nature versus nurture? We don't necessarily know. At least I don't know a lot of these things. But sometimes we don't necessarily need to know in order to accomplish that.
And so, I mean, I think that I've already like passed on too much bravery to my son. Like my son has like very tight curls, right? He got kind of like a little bit of a fro going. And so I always say like every time he hits his head, I'm like, God knew that this baby needed a helmet, you know? So he's a brave little boy, but here's where I've really jumped the shark here when it goes to epigenetics. So I did an experiment on my own family going back some years, actually. A real experiment. So I have 6 brothers and sisters, and most of them not so much in great mental shape, or at least historically not so great, right? And so I have a little brother and sister, and my sister at the time was 17, and my mom had passed away when she was 11, and you know she had been living in my grandmother's house, and then she got into like a big fight with my grandmother, so she moved in with me when she was 17. And then my younger brother, he was like homeless at the time. He was like a homeless alcoholic, right? Roaming the streets. And so I was like, okay, so I moved them both into my apartment, and this was my theory. And again, I could get some of these details wrong. Olivia, if you want to spot correct me or whatever, that's fine, right? But like, so this was my basic concept. I had heard about this idea of, what do you call it? When you have like a strategy for reproduction. I forget exactly what it was.
Birth
but it was
plan?
like, no, not like an actual strategy. It's like so there's like R strategy and K strategy. I heard like this is like the idea. So it was like so there's basically 2 concepts of reproduction. So R strategy in my mind is the one that's like spray and pray. It's like have as many kids as possible. Don't put a lot of resources into your kids. Just have as many kids as possible. Pump them out because that's the best way to reproduce, right? And then the K strategy is high investment in having few kids, right? And so the idea is that like our selection is kind of like found in a lot of rodents and stuff, right? So like with a rodent, you don't have a lot of control over your environment. An owl could just come out of nowhere, snatch you up. You don't know if you're going to be alive or dead tomorrow, right? So the idea isn't to like make these grand plans and highly invest into your children. It would be a terrible reproduction strategy. The best reproduction strategy for rodents is to have kids as young as possible and have as many as possible, because you don't know how long you're going to be alive, right? But then K selection is more like lions, right? Lions live for a long time. They don't have a lot of natural predators. They don't have a lot of natural hazards in their life, right? So they can anticipate that they'll live for a long time. So their best strategy is quality over quantity. Their best strategy is, and if they have a lot of kids, now they're basically creating competitors for natural resources too, right? So the idea is to have a few kids and really invest in them, train them how to hunt, do all these things that rodents don't do at all, right? And so this concept I heard was that like humans, like it's like obviously you could say like these are R selected species, these are K selected species, but I see it more as like a spectrum. Are you more R or more K, right? And then the way I look at it is like humans could also be more R or more K. Obviously, humans will always lean on the K side as far as this full spectrum of animals go. Humans are going to be more on the K side. But I think that even humans have more of like an R slant to them or a K slant depending on circumstances. Now, there are certain studies that back this theory up. I don't have the specific studies here, but I know I saw a study that was like young girls who don't have a father in the home typically start their menstrual cycle like a year earlier than girls who do have a father in the home, right? And so like this is like the idea is that like when a father's not in the home, it signals to the girl like, hey, we don't know what's going on. Maybe he's dead. Maybe there's a war going on. Like we don't know what life is going to be. Like there's less stability. So if there's less stability, you might not reproduce if you wait longer. So you got to reproduce earlier, right? And so that's like the idea, right? And so so then you might get pushed more in an R selected kind of mindset if you have a more unstable living situation, and then a more K selected mindset if you have a more stable living situation. And so I was like, hey, my family, as far as humans go, all the way on the R side, right? Like just because we've had a very unstable environment. My mom was a single mother of 7 kids. There was a lot going on. We were very, very poor growing up. It was like very hectic, right? So I was like, what if I took my younger brother and sister and I put them in in an environment that would stoke their K-ness, like would push them in the K direction, right? Like, and so what you would need is an environment where it didn't matter how much they failed or how much they didn't pay rent or something. I would always cover rent, right? I would never like stress them out and make them feel like if they didn't pay rent, I was going to kick them out or anything like that. They had to understand emotionally and psychologically like, hey, no matter what happens, he's going to take care of me. Right. And then that would activate, like, sure, I could pay the rent and stuff and I could take money from them and manage everything. But if I made them feel like I wasn't going to be there for them no matter what, the K would never get selected. Right. And so I did this experiment and it took years. Trust me, it's a stressful few years, let me tell you. And they really pushed the boundaries here. But today, they're both doing absolutely fantastic. My brother hasn't drank for years now. I think he's like 2 or 3 years sober. My little sister's doing much, much better. She doesn't have these huge emotional problems that she used to have. She lives like a perfectly normal life. You know, she has a boyfriend that she's been living with for a while. So anyway, I feel like the experiment worked. But but who knows? Like, so I'd like input from both Olivia and Maza here. So Olivia, evolutionary, do you think that this is epigenetically sound? Do you think I made mistakes? Do you think that the theory is good? What do you think about that? And then Maza, is this just some sort of psychological trick I pulled on my little brother and sister? Or do you think that, wait, so let's start with Olivia and then go to Maza.
Yeah. So in terms of experiments, and I say this with all the love in my heart, it was a terrible setup. You had way too many variables there to look at. But I do think that there could be some epigenetic things going on at a deeper level. But the first and foremost thing that you would have to define in this situation is you're thinking of R and K as two opposing forces. And they might very well be, at least for the purposes of this experiment. But you're also looking at it as all of these other things associated with R and all of these other things associated with K. Because in the end, and correct me if I'm wrong, you may not have had a really care if they had one kid versus 15 kids, as long as the rest of their life was on track, right?
Well, yeah. So the other, I didn't go on with the R and K. Like, we could talk about that stuff for hours. But the theory behind R and K is that, like, R's are way more prone to risky behavior. They don't think about the future. They plan for the future. K's are way more conservative in that regard. They care about, like, keeping and maintaining things. That is the concept. Is that it affects your whole life, not just your reproductive strategy.
Okay.
I mean, honestly, I would prefer that they both have 15 kids. I love kids.
That makes a lot of sense then. Well, in that case, then the experiment may have had a little bit more validity. But I do think that it was a success. I mean, for all intents and purposes, it seems like they are doing much better after this experiment / psychological phenomenon that happened. I do think that depending on the situation that you're in and depending on the environment you're in, your what's going on inside your body is going to be affected. You will have some physiological changes going on, and that could happen at the genome level with different types of DNA modifications happening, these epigenetic modifications happening. Now, what those are is anyone's guess. I don't necessarily know what's happening at that level based off of when you go from a really unstable environment to a healthy environment, but it does reprogram your body. And I'm sure Maza could talk a little bit more how it reprograms your brain.
So your experiment, if I sum up and relate it to with psychology, it is like strong bond. They act as librarian for your DNA, and they magnify your expression of genes, which is associated with resilience and longevity, while silencing those related to stress response. And in your case, you did great job. You provide them a shelter and give them the hope that there is someone who is taking care of them, and that gives them a hope of a bond, which really heal all those things which were maybe lacking before. So somehow you give that bondage to them, and that in return it was good outcome for that.
Okay. All right. Well, I appreciate the candid criticisms and explanations of my experiment. In my head, it was an epigenetic triumph, but I guess we'll let the audience decide. Now, before we go, I can hear my baby crying a little bit, so I'm going to jump off. We're about at time anyway. So do you guys have any closing statements or remarks or subjects of interest that you want people to think about at home regarding epigenetics, Lamarckian evolution, or anything tangentially related?
I do think that there are a couple of key takeaways that we can that, if we haven't covered already, should be covered. So when we're talking about epigenetics, it's this form of gene expression control, not necessarily changing your genes or not at all changing your genes. We're changing the expression of it. It also has a lot of environmental influence that will affect the outcome of that. And it's also something that's reversible. So if something happens and you get changed in a bad way genetically, you can reverse it to change it in a good way. And these things are also a lot of times heritable.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so it's the old argument of nature versus nurture, but it's like both.
Yeah.
All right, Maza.
I would say that the final takeaway would be biology is responsive and it's not rigid. And trauma is treatable and not encoded like that solid thing. And healing environments can be true, like biologically it does matter. And the final message would be that epigenetics does not mean pain is inherited. It means that healing can be too, that can be done. That's it.
Okay. All right. Well, everybody, time's about up. Remember, go to DancingDragons.CC. If you can book me, right, and I will train you how to do your own experiments on your family. Okay.
You have to check the scientific body
whether
first.
whether or not those will be moral or ethical is that's a different story altogether. But thank you everybody for coming out tonight. I think that this is a fantastic episode. It's a topic that's near and dear to my heart. So with that all said,